can you do now at the end of 2024 to ensure that 2025 doesn't just go by in a blur? What can you do to set yourself up for really living intentionally, creating and shaping the life that you desire, the life that feels purposeful, that is open to joy, that is expanding and growing, but not at a rate too uncomfortable that you feel like you're in chaos? There's so much that we can be doing at the end of this year to set ourselves up for next year. And I am here to help you to navigate the changes that are coming in light of the transits astrologically, in light of the energies of right now. If this is your first time joining the show, I hope you feel my heartfelt gratitude and my deep appreciation for you being here. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And if you're a loyal listener, thank you. Thank you for listening. And I hope you also feel my gratitude. And I hope you feel like I am just reaching right into your car, to your earbuds, to your computer, to anywhere you are listening and speaking right to you. Because I know some of you listen every week, and I know you're the ones who are reaching out to me or posting on my YouTube, and I am thinking of your names right now. So hopefully you're feeling it. You're getting a little bit of that high five, that energetic hug that I'm sending you right now. Every moment is a sacred moment, and there's something about the moment when we're doing something or we choose to do something or stars align and it just happens. There's something about that moment that is an indicator of what most needs to be communicated, articulated at this time. And this is perfect because I'm recording this with the moon in Capricorn, and the moon in Capricorn is not the most fun, playful, let's go have a happy hour kind of moon. It is a moon of let's get serious, let's get focused, let's strategize. So by the time you're listening to this, the energy is going to be different. The moon will have changed signs. The moon changes signs about every 2.5 days. But for right now, while I'm recording this, there is a reason why my guides, my spiritual helpers, and yours decided that this was the magic moment right here, right now. And so what's happening right now, I want to talk a little bit about the astrology so that I can help to contextualize this end of the year for you and why this time is important for setting you up for 2025. But what's happening right now is we have Mercury retrograde and Mars is moving really slowly, getting ready to station retrograde on December 6th. So just a couple days. By the time this comes out, Mars will be retrograde and we will all be feeling it. So what are retrograde planets and why do they matter and why do we feel like things are in an upheaval during retrograde cycles? A retrograde planet is closer to the Earth than it is at other times in its orbital path. And so as a result, we see the planets brighter in the sky. If you go out at night, you're going to see Mars shining pretty brightly. And especially toward the middle of the retrograde in January, when it's making its move from Leo back into Cancer, a retrograde planet it shines brightly. We feel the influence of it in a visceral, palpable way. And that's why we often are dealing with matters in our lives related to the planet, the planetary symbolism, what the planet represents. We're dealing with issues in our lives related to that planet in like stereo, magnified when that planet is retrograde. So think about it. Mercury, we're going to take each one of these separately. Mercury is the planet of communication. It's the planet of transportation, how we get from one place to another. Mercury is the planet of our thoughts, our hobbies, our interests. It's what we think about. It's also the planet of our internal dialogue. And for those of you who are a little bit more advanced in your astrological knowledge, one thing I have noticed over and over again is that our internal dialogue starts to change when our progressed Mercury moves into a new sign. It's like we have a different internal script. And so we're thinking about different things. We're reflecting different things about ourselves. And that's something that happens to all of us throughout our lives as progressed Mercury moves through our charts. Transiting Mercury, which is the Mercury we're talking about in today's show, transiting Mercury functions in a similar way. When Mercury is moving through a sign, we prioritize thoughts about that subject. And you'll notice this when you read news stories or when you hear people talking, that certain keywords of the sign that Mercury is moving through, those keywords are showing up in conversations. And I would love to do one of those word maps of news headlines during each Mercury sign. And I think I will. That'll be an interesting exercise. That'll be fun. So I'm going to try that and just see if there's evidence for it, because right now it's just anecdotal. This is something I notice. So Mercury is cruising through Sagittarius. What is Sagittarius? Sagittarius relates to our philosophy. But it's not just our philosophy. It's like, what is the deep truth that we have come to accept as the truth with a capital T? And a lot of us are looking for that right now, because Mercury in Sagittarius doesn't always make it clear. And what can happen with Mercury in Sagittarius is that we can get hung up on what we believe to be true, to where we aren't open to other perspectives, or we have our mind set that this is what happened and this is what's going on. And so we want to remember to keep an open mind. Sagittarius loves absolutism. It loves to have everything synthesized in a philosophical understanding. And sometimes life isn't black and white, it is gray. Sometimes there are things that are just a little bit off, but you can't really categorize them as amoral. They're just in that gray area between what's right and good and what is and what isn't. So Mercury in Sagittarius awakens our thoughts about our beliefs. Mercury in Sagittarius is also higher education. It's also our faith and our religious beliefs. Sagittarius is our perspective on other worlds and other cultures. Are we interested in exploring different places, to seeing new horizons? Are we willing to expand our worldview and see the big picture? Or are we going to get hung up in the little details? And so this retrograde cycle is a lot about that. It's a lot about synthesizing big picture, looking at our lives in the small picture, ironing out the details of our lives, while we're also keeping our sights set on the horizons that we want to explore spiritually, physically in terms of our travel plans, and energetically. What kinds of expansion are we doing within our own awareness? Are we willing to learn to be the best that we can be? Or are we fixed on the idea that we're good, that we don't need to grow that much? If you're listening to this show, I bet you are one of the people in the camp of how can I grow more? And I definitely am, sometimes to the chagrin of the people I love, like, oh, what's she doing now? Oh, she's growing again. Okay. Why is she choosing that hard path? She's growing. She's expanding. Yep. So she's going to run for city council. She's going to do this. She's going to do it. Oh, okay. So if you're like me, then you're geared up for it. You're excited. You're ready to rush in. One other thing about this Mercury retrograde I'll say. So Mercury retrograde, just blanket message. Mercury retrograde can be a time when, again, Mercury's bigger. It's closer to the Earth. we feel it. We're feeling that Mercury pull. Like actually, the two planets are interacting with one another. Earth and Mercury are interacting with one another in a way that creates some tension between the two of us. And so all things Mercury are magnified, they're intensified, which is why when we are moving through a Mercury retrograde phase, our communication becomes an issue. Or there might be delays, or you might have to proofread everything about 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 times, if in my case. And so Mercury brings out the awareness of the little details of life, and it makes us pay extra attention to them. So we take a little bit of a microscope to the details of our lives, to the schedules, to the organization, to the way we call people or don't call people back. That's one of my Mercury retrograde lessons every single time. You didn't call me back. I know, I forgot. I don't know about you. This is a total sidebar. But sometimes what happens for me is I'll be in a session or I'll be in a meeting, and a text will come in, a call will come in, and my computer's open and it's coming up on my computer and it looks like it's been read, but I never read it. So I don't see it and I miss it entirely. That happens so often. So if I've ever done that to you, please don't take it personally. Sometimes I really just don't see messages. So it's a time when we're really refining. How do we communicate with others? What do we talk about? And anything that's been hiding in the shadows all comes up to the surface. So any truth that you've been holding back, anything that you've been thinking over and over again, but you haven't said it out loud, that's going to come up during the Mercury retrograde cycle. And the world goes through a collective readjustment period where we look back at the policies that have been made before in the past, or the decisions that were made in our organizations or our businesses. And we say, is this still working for us? And if not, we make minor adjustments. Mercury is small things. It's not the great big cataclysmic change. It is, our relationship isn't working for me. Let's make small adjustments and see if there are ways that we can identify our own individual triggers, ways that we might want to better communicate, things that we can do to improve the way that we get along, that we relate to one another. So it's the minor adjustments that lead to significant change over time. One other thing I'll say about Mercury retrograde is that when we have technology that breaks down or things that need repairs, often we're getting upgrades. And this is something I see across the board with new cars, people who feel the need to buy a new car, or whose computer breaks down, or whose water heater goes out. When we have those Mercury retrograde technological issues, often it is a time when we need new equipment for the future of our work or of our home, or there's some kind of upgrade. And we don't often make those big ticket purchases willingly. So the Mercury retrograde cycle gives us the opportunity to say, you know what, I have been needing a new computer and I should probably get it before the tariffs start, Trump's tariffs start go into action and the prices raise, or before, something happens with microchips and I can't get a computer. It's a good time to be deciding what in your life needs to up level and taking careful steps toward that. Mercury was the god who could go in and out of the underworld and remain unscathed. Mercury has this symbolism of being able to go into the shadows and not take on the heaviness, the grief, the resentment, or the heartbreak that lie in the shadows. And so during Mercury retrograde cycles, what happens across the board is that we have to go into our shadows and we have to look at all of the subtle ways that we prevent ourselves from having what we consciously desire. And I'm going to give you an example of this. So I have a dear, dear friend who has had a lot of relationship ups and downs in their life. And one of their core shadow wounds that keeps playing out over and over again has to do with abandonment and loss. And in particular, in early childhood experiences. And then that repeats itself in relationships with choosing unavailable partners and the person who doesn't call back. And invariably, every time Mercury goes retrograde, 3 times or 4 times a year, that situation presents itself one more time, where there's someone who's not calling them back, where there's someone who they really like and it's not going anywhere and they feel rejected. And I remind them every time, hey, it's Mercury retrograde. Just give it a couple of weeks and the dust will settle. Don't take it to the bank. And it happens every time. And in going through the pain of the reliving of that childhood wound, that first childhood experience of being rejected by their family, and by going back and revisiting that primal wound of rejection that they faced in their family of origin early in life, by replaying it over and over again with these relationship scenarios, the wound has new layers of healing each time. The call, if you will, from the universe and from Mercury retrograde, the call is, are you going to let your family's rejection keep you from experiencing the fullness of love and power and light that you can? And so over the years, I've seen them make different choices each Mercury retrograde, choosing not to engage with the rejection, choosing to prioritize other relationships, or to do different things, or to do the relationship dynamics that have been painful differently. And now here we are, Mercury retrograde. I haven't heard from them at all about any scenarios related to this pain. In fact, there's a real healing, a real clearing that has happened. And so maybe there are remnants of that energy, but it's with an enlightened perspective. I have another scenario that I'll share with you, and this is that I have another good friend, and every Mercury retrograde, there's a financial thing. It's like there's the feeling of not having enough, and that gets replayed over and over again. And here again is a wound, a primal wound of being in a family where there wasn't enough. And so our primal wounds are hanging out in the shadows. And over time, our call is to heal those wounds, is to say, you know what? That was then, this is now. And the more we do that, and the more we stay conscious of that during the Mercury retrograde cycle, the more we get to bring what's in the shadows out into the light. And ultimately, that is what enlightenment is all about. It is about looking at our shadows. It is about facing those fears. It is about realizing that they are illusions and doing things different, making different choices. So that is what we need to do this month as we're closing out 2024 and getting ready for the astrology of 2025. Before we get into that strategy session that we're going to do, I also want to bring up Mars retrograde, because we talked about Mercury going in and out of the shadows. Mars retrograde is a different experience. Mars retrograde isn't so much about going in deep and pulling in back. Mars retrograde is really about composting anger. It's about looking at the frustrations. It's about composting anger. It's about being aware of the ways in which we haven't experienced our power, or our power's been usurped through relationships or through circumstances in our lives, different conflicts in our lives. Mars retrograde is really about going into the conflicts that have been unresolved and coming out on the other side of those conflicts, like going back onto the battlefield, if you will, and coming out on the other side with either a truce and an agreement to do things in a different way, or a new boundary in place. Mars is retrograde from December 6th through February 23rd. And so we have a nice long extended period of Mars retrograde to be engaging with these conflicts. And I want to be really clear about the kinds of conflicts that we're talking about. You know how you can be angry at someone and you don't really say anything out loud. You just kind of tuck it in, or you're working through your frustrations, or there are little tiny resentments that build up. And it's just easier to let it go and to not make a big deal of it. Those conflicts that are not externalized become internal conflicts, where you're fighting with yourself in some way. Often in a health issue, this is where some of the anger that we don't have that's expressed outward turns inward, and we can get heartburn or depression or any number of things that relate to the internal battle that we're not having externally. I find that this happens when we don't honor our boundaries. We don't want to do something, and then we end up saying yes, or we end up doing something that we really don't want to be doing, and nothing inside of us wants to, and we're compromising, and or where we are blaming something or someone, a circumstance or someone, for something that we're not taking responsibility for ourselves. There are those kinds of conflicts that are stewing beneath the surface. And when Mars is retrograde, Mars is bigger, it's brighter in the night sky. We feel it, we see it. It's usually like a bright red planet in the heavens. And when it's like, sometimes it's the first star, the first luminary that comes out at night. And so Mars is very visible. And so we are aware of our anger and the unrest inside of us. And our urge might be to go to one of our favorite coping mechanisms: isolating, going away, escaping, fight, flight, freeze, whatever your go-to response is. That's the kind of movement that we lean into during Mars retrograde. And ultimately what's happening, the benefit of Mars retrograde, is Mars helps you to really bring that anger up to the surface, to compost it. And anger that is composted, that is transmuted, that is turned into something different, becomes a boundary setting machine or a boundary keeping machine. It becomes fuel. It drives us to accomplish something, to do something, to move. Anger inspires action, and it also inspires a no. And for some people who don't have the experience of being taught that no is safe or no is okay, this is a very important transit. This Mars retrograde is extra punchy because we have Mars opposing Pluto. And this is like an ongoing storyline that started on November 3rd, right before the US election, and it goes until April. Mars is going to be moving back and forth between Leo and Cancer. So while it's in Leo, and that goes until January 6th, and while it's in Leo, we are aware of the ways in which we aren't being heard, we aren't being seen, the ways in which we're not being respected. Mars in Leo is also anything that we are feeling right or righteous about. Mars in Leo says, well, other people might not see things the same way. And how are you going to honor your own perspective and expression while also being open to others' ideas, thoughts, and visions? So Mars in Leo is I think of Mars as being like the soldier, the warrior of our zodiac, our solar system. And Mars in Leo is like that Braveheart soldier, like the what's his name, Mel Gibson, riding the horse. Like, I am going off to battle. I am going to express myself. I am carrying my most glorious sword and wearing all the regalia. And then Mars moves into Cancer. And Mars in Cancer is very different. It is it's more of a soldier who's working behind the scenes, not out on the battlefield, but who's working behind the scenes to build defenses. So it is building a fortress around your encampment. And I'm using these very specific battle terms because when we're talking about Mars collectively, a lot of times we are talking about war. We are talking about the ways in which we're fighting. And we're also talking about military activity. When we're talking about it in our personal lives, we're talking about our libido, our drive. We're talking about the ways that we enforce our boundaries or not. And we're talking about the conflicts that we get into. We're also talking about our sexuality and that just the motivation that we have for procreation, for creation, for life, for ambition, for our goals. Mars relates to our ego as well. And so all of those Mars things, sectors, personality traits, aspects of our lives that I just mentioned, those are all the focal point for the end of the year. Mars is going to be opposing Pluto a couple of other times, one on January 2nd, and then again in April. Mars opposite Pluto is a tricky transit. This opposition correlates to the conjunction of Mars and Pluto that happened February 13th of 2024. So think about what was happening back then. And that's the storyline that's reaching its climax, that's reaching its peak right now. Every planet has what's called synodic cycles when they come together in a conjunction with other planets. And when those two planets come together, they're starting a brand new cycle. There's a whole new storyline that they're playing out. And usually the opposition is the climax of that story. It's like the pivotal culmination of that energy. And then there's a resolution that happens and a lot of activity that happens right before they come together again. So if you think back at what was happening in your life in February of 2024, that is there, you're seeing hints of that right now and through April. And I'll just give you a little context for what was happening at that time. So that was when Mars and Pluto were right next to us, right next to each other, forming a conjunction. And that conjunction was happening at around 36 minutes of Aquarius, so early in the sign. And the Sabian symbol for that was an old Adobe mission in California. And it's the power inherent in all of us to endure far beyond our lifespan. So there's a real sense of what we're building is meant to last, and we need to be conscious about what we're building. So I bring up Mars retrograde and Mercury retrograde because right now, those retrograde cycles are slowing things down in order for us to get focused, in order for us to reprioritize. And so it's a good time for establishing a strategy for moving forward, for building a business plan, for getting anything that you want to launch in 2025 ready. So building your website, writing your book. This is a time to finish business. It's a time to complete. It's a time to clean up and clean house so that you can have some space for moving forward next year. In 2025, there is a period of time from July 7th to September 1st where the outer planets, Neptune, Pluto, Uranus, Saturn, are all going to be in fire and air signs. And it gives us a preview of what we're headed into in 2026 when those planets finally make their way in. But that is a real opportune time to start something new. And we will see a lot of new beginnings happening in the summer and early fall of next year, of 2025. And if you have a dream, if you have a goal, if you have something that you've been wanting to do, but it feels risky, or it feels like it hasn't been the time, then you might want to think about how you can designate some time, some resources, some energy to that initiative or that endeavor next year, and start this year with just planting some seeds, clearing out anything that you need to say no to. Mars' retrograde is good at boundaries. And so this is a good time to cut out what no longer is feeding you, what is worn out, what is tired. If there are activities that you do on a weekly basis that are just like, oh, why am I doing this? Stop, clean out, go through a purging process right now, so that when we get to that pivotal time in the summer of next year, you can be ready to go. You have nothing standing in your way. That is an open road kind of period. It's a period where there are no guardrails, there are no obstacles, and we can accomplish a lot if we are intentional. If we are not intentional, then what can happen is we get swept up in someone else's desire, or we let life kind of run itself and go into an autopilot. And then we look back in 2026 and we say, well, look at the opportunities I've missed. We don't want you to be that person. We don't want you to miss out on anything or feel like you're just letting life happen. So between now and really February 23rd, because Mars retrograde is going to give us a little bit of a slow start to the year. It's like we don't quite get to go out with the full momentum that we have. We're all easing into the year. And so that's a grace period. It's a period where we don't have to have all of our plans in place or our intentions set, where we can have a glimpse or vague idea of what we want to create. But it's more important to clean up, finish business, set up boundaries, honor your time, prioritize your health, get all of your foundational aspects of your life in place, and have things ready to pitch, to propose, to launch in the summer of next year. Now, I know some of you have a lot of plans already for January and February, and that's great. I'm not saying cancel plans. What I'm saying is create space. And I think the more you can connect with other people through community activities, through retreats or workshops, or honoring and tending to your spiritual self, that is going to also set you up to be in a good position to advance projects or ideas when we get into 2025. There's a lot of the energy of air and fire together is electricity. It is invention. It is excitement. It is like there is movement and we are going somewhere. And it can also feel like, we're going too far, too fast. So this is why it's important right now to be intentional about what you want to create. And it's also why I think it's a good time to be sitting with your journal. I say this as someone who does not journal and always says I should, but I don't. But to sit down with your journal and just write down, what are some of the goals that you have that you would like to have happen in your life? What are your intentions for your relationships, for your family life, for your home? And to be very clear about getting it out of your head and into a form where you can either say it out loud to someone or make a vision board or write it down. This act itself is good because if you think about it, energy is energy. And if you were doing archery, for example, you would want a target to focus on so that your arrows aren't just like going out all over the place, so that you're hitting something that is that you're aiming at something that you want to hit. You're aiming at a target. Your goals and intentions are the same type of energy. It is having a target that all of your energy can aim toward. And even if that target shifts, or if things happen and you don't quite make it, that's okay. The exercise that we're talking about is just an exercise in energy. And energy flows in the direction of our intentions. And if we're not setting conscious intentions, then those unconscious intentions from our shadow are going to be running the show. And you know those unconscious intentions from your shadow because they're the things in your life that aren't fun, that you didn't consciously want. They're the things that the fight that you have with someone that creates a complete distraction for your week. It's the financial setbacks that you have because you overspent or didn't budget or thought you could do better than you did. Your priority for the end of the year is clean house, literally and metaphorically. And I would really go a couple of steps deeper into this. So one, yes, look at your space. What can you declutter? What can you let go of? What is crowding your space? Because that represents a crowding of energy that doesn't allow you to have that flow toward what you desire. If you have stuff blocking your space, it's an energetic correspondence to what is happening in your life, with pathways to desire and success being blocked. That's for another episode. We could do a whole episode just on that. So clean your space. Then also clean out, do a digital declutter. Look at your emails. What can you let go of? What can you get rid of? Look at your files. What's old and outdated? What are you never going to open again? Purge, let it go, free up some space in the digital world. And then also take back to your thoughts. What are you thinking about that is creating resistance or block in your creative ideas, in your creative possibilities, in the delight of your hobbies and your interests? Are there relationship questions that are continuing to play like a broken record? If so, stop that record and set an intention to have peace around those relationship questions. Are there negative self-talk scripts that you keep reading over and over again? If so, it's time to delete those scripts and adopt new ones that are more in line with the targets that you're setting for yourself. So we're doing a physical decluttering. We're doing a mental decluttering. We are doing an electronic decluttering. And then a spiritual decluttering. And the spiritual decluttering is, am I holding anyone else's pain inside my body? Am I refusing to forgive someone because they deserve my anger? They deserve to be punished. And I'm not saying that some people don't deserve anger and punishment, or that we don't want to hold people accountable. What I'm saying is this creating an inner conflict for you that is preventing you from having the full access to your power and potential? And if so, then that's one to think about decluttering. So we're going to do a purge. And then we're going to simultaneously sit down 30 minutes a week, maybe even like just 5 minutes a day, and dream. What would be joyful for me to experience next year? What kinds of seeds do I really want to plant? What do I deeply desire? And some of you, this exercise is hard because you don't quite know. But I'm just saying, if you can be intentional about setting some targets in place, then your energy has somewhere to go when there's a free flow of energy in the summer of 2025. And that period in 2025 isn't just about next year. It's about the next 9 years. 2025 is a 9-year numerologically. And so it's the ending of a cycle, but everything we start or dream or imagine for our lives next year, those are seeds that we plant in 2026. And those seeds have about a 9-year life expectancy or trajectory. Obviously, some things that we start live longer. You start a business and it could last, 50 years, 60 years. But there's a 9-year cycle that we're entering into. And so anything we're intending and creating in 2025 has staying power. So your targets for next year set you up for a really rich, expansive, abundant future. And that is your cosmic call to action this week. It is to sit for about 30 minutes a week. Maybe you want to do it longer. That's totally okay. And dream, imagine what is possible for you. Really live into the abundant experience that you can have, that is your birthright, that you deserve. And let that be the target that you aim for in 2025 that leads you to the next 9-year cycle that starts 2026. If you want to go and do a deep dive, my webinar on the astrological outlook of 2025 is happening on December 21st. So I invite you to join that. You can find out more on my website, rachellangastrologer.com. And also, I encourage you to get involved in my membership, where you can connect with people who are of a like mind, of a like vibration, and who are moving their lives in a similar direction that you are moving yours. And don't forget to like, to follow, to review, and to pass this on. Let's keep growing. Let's keep building this community, and let's keep spreading hope at a time when the world really needs it. All right, everyone. Have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the week, and I will see you next time.